Welcome to Profiteers versus the People, the show where we punch up and dispel myths surrounding modern, quote-unquote, great people.
For the uninitiated, we take the very rich, particularly those with a media presence like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or the Mowbrays, we put them through our PR torture test and see if they come out on crutches, our PR torture test acronym.
C stands for consumer harm, the R for rich parents, U for union suppression or employee abuse, T for tax avoidance or tax dependency, the second C for child labor allegations, the H for harassment allegations, E for egregious behavior after hours, and S for slap suits and journalist suppression. I'm Money Mike.
And I'm Rad Bill.
And
And
This is Profiteers versus the People.
so, all right, I'm going to get pretentious here for a second. I feel like I've touted how much I like the Vonnegut books in the past on this podcast. I know it's pretentious, but there's a line on the flap of Mother Night that goes something like this. We are what we pretend to be, so be careful what you pretend to be. We covered this in the last episode, but Larry lies a lot, and his version of the truth is one that varies upon each retelling. When something goes wrong at Oracle, according to Larry, it went wrong for at least one of these three reasons. First, it was a forced error. Second, without Larry's involvement, someone did something sleazy or stupid. Third, Larry is inept. What do I know? Now, this third explanation would often serve as a veil for the second explanation. For his part, Larry doesn't like explicitly talking to people behind their back, so usually when he does, it will come off the way it did when he was explaining the extremely destructive strategies implemented by Gary Kennedy. Quote, all I'm saying is that if something like this were happening under my nose, I either knew about it and was complicit, or I'm an incompetent and incapable CEO. And I'm assuring you that I am incompetent and incapable as a CEO. Now, apparently, this was a pretty common refrain for Larry, hence the Vonnegut quote we opened with.
careful, Larry.
Be careful, buddy. But this does something else, too. And this tactic is relied upon constantly by businessmen who fail their way into the stratosphere. It's a seemingly humble statement which quietly saddles someone else with the blame and exonerates Ellison.
When thinking about Larry Ellison, you should never allow humility to be in the same sentence unless a not is also in that same sentence.
Totally.
If Larry Ellison is exhibiting humility, he is probably lying.
That's it. He's exhibiting humility because it is second to apologizing in his book.
Exactly. He's playing the everyman. Me?
Yep.
What would I know about being a billionaire CEO? I'm just a regular cool guy genius who likes fast cars and big houses. I don't know anything about this corporate stuff. Remember that time that I bought that car and drove off into another city for no reason?
Have you ever seen the movie Iron Man? I'm not saying I am Tony Stark, but in a lot of ways, I kind of am like Tony Stark. Alas, picking up where we left off in the last episode, it would seem that Larry Ellison's fate was sealed by his supposed and thoroughly demonstrated ineptitude.
To set the scene, it's Halloween night. And despite the company's sudden firing of 400 employees, I guess that's their trick, no treat for them, Oracle stock continues its dive and closes beneath $5. Larry receives a call from the people at Morgan Stanley. As you might remember, he took out a loan for hundreds of millions of dollars and used Oracle stock as collateral. And suddenly, the stock doesn't cover the value of the loaned amount. So, Morgan Stanley is going to need some more.
Yeah.
The last thing that Larry wants to do in this moment is sell Oracle stock. But even after mortgaging all of his homes, selling all of his cars, selling all of his other stocks, Larry still doesn't have enough money. He's gonna have to start selling Oracle. However, the shares that just 12 months earlier were worth about $1 billion are now worth around $160 million. And as Larry begins offloading, the word margin call is fluttering around quite a bit. And that $160 million in share value is going to start burning away even more as he sells shares for less and less and less. As he offloads the shares, the other shareholders will begin suing Larry and his organization, and before long, the added cost of those lawsuits piled on top the dwindling value of the stock being sold. This is the definition of a corporate death spiral.
And you see it a lot too.
Yeah, this is the reverse short squeeze.
Yep.
Right? Like in a short squeeze, the party shorting the stock has to keep buying the stock to cover their short, and that's what causes the value of the stock to rise very quickly. But with this, it's the opposite, that the person holding all the stock has to keep selling the stock, and whenever you sell stock, it reduces the value. So you have to sell more to get the same amount of money, and you get the gist. It's a snowball.
Yep.
As Larry's looking forward, we're thinking that Oracle probably isn't going to make it out of 1991, more than likely. And it will end the all too predictable tale of a dumb and reckless man building and burying an enormous corporation in a decade and a half. But here's the thing, though. Morgan Stanley never made that call.
Yeah, dude. To this day, one of the big ironies of Silicon Valley, this thing that appears to run like a finely tuned watch, is that it is a giant rickety disaster, and the whole thing's built on dumbasses and vaporware.
And it's held together by fucking chewed gum and duct tape.
What wound up happening is that he just wasn't held accountable. For his part, Larry has in the past explained that the drop in his net worth was almost completely meaningless in the midst of this crisis. Basically, I had $1 billion and now I have well over 100 million. It's still more than I could ever spend. And to this end, there is really no financial lever one could pull to make Larry do the right thing should the need ever arise. And this is just a demonstration that a company like Morgan Stanley is uninterested in forcing a person like Larry's hand anyways. There's nothing institutional that is going to take a stand against someone like this, even to guard their own position in many cases, when they have this sort of money. If the system worked the way it was supposed to, fate would have stopped just about everyone we have ever covered from building a $1 billion net worth. And Larry Ellison would be no exception. In fact, he would likely be penniless and maybe incarcerated. You see, the chickens that brought Oracle's stock below $5 by coming home to roost had friends. And were it not for the people in Larry's orbit, the return of those other chickens would have spelled certain doom for our nincompoop subject, with or without Morgan Stanley's help. In the midst of all this hellfire, Jeff Walker, Oracle's CFO in the late 80s, decided it was probably best that he saw himself out. And in search of a replacement, Oracle's board set their sights on Jeff Henley. Now, as the story goes, Larry was vehemently against the appointment of Henley, one of the two men we are ultimately going to credit with saving the company. When the board held a vote to bring him on, Larry apparently threatened resignation, although he pussied out when the board followed through giving Henley the job. They were like, hey, you know what? Quit, because we need a change in pace anyways.
And for what it's worth, Larry denies this series of events. So, allegedly. But he does acknowledge that he was against Henley's appointment, but only because of the pay package that Henley was in line to receive. But Larry doesn't care about money, right?
Larry doesn't care about money. He's completely unconcerned with that. Do we believe Larry's recounting of events? Almost never, but in his defense, Henley's pay package was pretty breathtaking. Oracle would be paying the man tens of thousands of dollars each month, and that's fine. That's consulting pay. They would also award him 500,000 shares in Oracle stock.
Which is a lot.
That's a ton of money.
But it's also pretty run-of-the-mill for executives. Like, they make a comparatively paltry salary, and a huge amount of their compensation is in stock. And the thought is that it will align their interests with the interests of the company. Maybe someday we'll do a episode on executive compensation. I think that'd be really fun.
I think it would. A lot of CFOs kill themselves when things go south. I think it would be super fun to cover that.
And the CFO is always the guy going to fucking jail. The CEO,
Totally.
the CEO is always like, "What? We were embezzling."
I had no idea so much of that money was in my private jet. That's unbelievable.
Never be the third guy in command because you are going to fucking jail.
That's it. You're the fall guy.
You might have a title, but your real title is the fall guy. But
CFO,
anyway.
Chief Fall Guy Officer.
So, back to Jeff. This was generous, but also on the subject of being an executive, Jeff Henley was probably going to earn this shit.
Yeah.
The chickens, you see, were on the horizon, and they were really excited to come home to roost.
I don't know what roosting means. Does that mean they're getting cooked?
I
Or,
think
like, they're
roosting
laying eggs?
means laying eggs, yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
I
Yeah,
said that
so-
with so much confidence and no information.
Yeah, what does roosting mean, audience? Put it in the comments
What's a
if you would,
roost?
please. Yes.
Yeah.
What is a roost? Do chickens like it? And if it's laying eggs, why would you not be thrilled about that? Starting out, Jeff Henley replaced his predecessors' absurd accounting practices with ones that one might consider normal, even ethical.
Legal, perchance.
Yes. Our main source recognizes these changes as common sense, kind of apprehensively, and seemingly, it fesses up to those common sense measures being pretty absent from Oracle's financial strategy up to this point. For example, Oracle stopped recognizing all the revenue from a maintenance contract up front, instead recognizing each 30-day period as it passed, which is much closer to the industry standard.
Common sense. Common sense. Jeff Henley got to the company and was like, "What? You're doing what? No, don't do that."
Are you shitting me, Larry?
Yeah.
Now, Larry hadn't implemented these practices because he knew they meant slower growth. But again, Larry's accounting had almost killed his company and threw him into bankruptcy. So it was...
Yeah. Larry's lucky that no one went to jail over this.
Yeah, and hold, because you're going to see just how lucky he was. Larry's bad accounting in total would be one of the biggest, scariest chickens with which Henley would contend. It was Chicken Megatron. To illustrate just how abysmal the company's accounting practices were, when the husband of one of the 400 salespeople Oracle fired in 1990 called asking about commissions she was owed, the company was forced to admit that they didn't know when they would be able to cut the checks because they had no way of knowing which salespeople were owed which amounts. They're a database company. In keeping with this shit show, in March of 1991, Larry calls Jeff in a panic. As it turns out, the company's books were bolstered by $90 million in what are now becoming obviously bad deals and uncollected payments from technical support. Basically $90 million of the dollars Oracle told everyone they were going to be making weren't going to be made after all. And someone was going to have to break this news to the board. Now, Jeff, he did this and survived, insisting that the only way to manage this crisis was to write off the full amount. And with all this fixing, it comes as no surprise that Oracle's growth hereafter was slow. Where imaginary money had compelled the company to double in size year after year in the 80s, as Henley exhumed Oracle's body, the company grew just 12% in 91 and 15% in 1992.
Which, to be fair, 12% in 1991 and 15% in 1992 is solid fucking growth.
Those are good numbers.
Yes.
What you have here is a company that is growing, and growth is good, but the fate of Oracle in this moment, in the early 90s, was still at great risk of succumbing to its own now retired business practices. In the beginning of 1991, Oracle had to restate the financial results for the last 3 quarters of 1990.
Which is
Then,
bad.
which is bad. Then they restated the income of fiscal year 1990 as a whole. Turns out they had understated income one quarter by 21% and overstated income another quarter by 121%.
Uh-oh.
In 1993, and this is where we say that Larry's lucky he's not in jail, the SEC came knocking. It turns out a ton of what happened between 89, when things were great, and February of 1991, when the company was trying desperately to survive, were what we as non-lawyers will boldly call extra legal. As it turns out, to hit those high numbers, Oracle was getting to work double billing customers for products and technical support, invoicing for work that had never been performed. They failed to credit customers for returns. They booked revenue that were contingent. They prematurely recognized revenue, and deals were booked. The technical closed the following quarter. Deals with side letters allowing cancellations at any time were booked, and deals were booked on technology that hadn't even existed yet. You see, in our last episode, we framed Henley's predecessor as a voice of reason. In reality, Jeff Walker was about as competent in finance as the sales department's financial team was. The only truly competent member of Oracle's finance team, with any meaningful sway, was Stephen Imbler, who was the number 2 guy in the finance department. Fortunately for Walker, Imbler's work also fell under the umbrella of Jeff Walker's work. Unfortunately for both men, although Imbler caught a lot of misbehavior, there was a whole lot more that made it right under his nose. The SEC complaint described Oracle the way you might describe an untamed beast. Without aggressive control, it seemed the company was destined to wreak havoc on all that it touched. The agency ultimately, as such, let Oracle off the hook without requiring the company to admit any guilt, after paying an astounding fine of $100,000. Larry Ellison probably makes that every minute. Unsurprisingly, after the storm subsided, Jeff Walker, Imbler's former boss, spun the whole thing into a positive, citing the returns for shareholders and the explosive growth, and Larry Ellison did the very same. He was the man who had fostered the meteoric rise of a tech giant and then saved the company and its stock from the depths of hell. The other burden on the company, a swarm of suing investors and customers, would agree to a settlement with the company somewhere in the realm of $24 million. At this point, by and large, the company is away from the scariest of the chickens. In June 1992, to help the company actually rally from these depths, the company's other savior arrived, Raymond Lane, who was what we might call a sensible businessman who listened to customers and tried to meet their needs, which even our source acknowledges is something that Oracle had never really prioritized.
I don't know why that's fucking hilarious to me.
Though his job was still an uphill battle, he benefited from another new phenomenon at Oracle. The same day he joined, Oracle released a product which not only did everything Larry Ellison said it would, it also worked. It did the things it was supposed to do, and it didn't spend all of its time glitching out. 15 years after the company's founding, and for the very first time, it had all the ingredients that typically accompany rabid sales practices to form a successful company. Diligent attention to existing customers, a sensible accounting method, and a good product. As the company found its footing, Larry went ahead and got distracted again.
You see, if there's one thing you can say has persisted in Silicon Valley, it's the rising and falling tides of tech revolution mania. When Larry was young, he was dazzled by this and willing to completely ignore his financial constraints to go out and chase moving cars. Old Larry, and at this point he's 50, can afford to spend whatever it takes to be the best at chasing cars. And that's essentially what he does here.
Yeah. Now, was this a problem for Oracle? In some ways, but this time where Larry once had disciples trying desperately to be his number 2 and to be perfect little Larry Ellisons like Jeff Walker and Gary Kennedy, who literally considered the company's destiny to be a holy mission. He now had Raymond Ward and Jeff Henley, 2 men who bent Larry over the barrel when negotiating employment with the company, who could serve as Larry's handlers. We didn't touch on this. Raymond Ward's pay package was 300,000 shares, which is also pretty damn strong. I can't imagine either man would tolerate the phrase that we just used, handlers. But boy, does the book dance around that phrase a lot without explicitly saying this. The author goes to great pains to describe the two men talking Larry off ledges in the boardroom, and he would explode in 30 to 90 minutes late with another quote-unquote big idea.
To this end, the company was in good hands, because when Larry was being Larry, there were adults in the room. Ray and Jeff could handle things and leave Larry to go chase the biggest semi roaring down the 101.
Yeah, and in the early 90s, all the big semis were rolling down a different, more metaphorical highway. The information highway, which promised 500 channels to every house. I didn't know about this. I knew the phrase because it lingered for a while, the information highway. What they were promising to deliver Silicon Valley with the information highway was 500 channels to every household via a massive line of fiber optic cables. Before long, unsurprisingly, dogs grew tired of chasing cars on the information highway and instead made way for the information superhighway.
Good news, everyone. California is going to solve all your problems with a fucking highway.
As they do. Now, instead of just having tons of channels to choose from, with the information superhighway, viewership would be able to choose what to watch when they wanted. Larry had a plan he hoped would help him catch something. The things moved pretty fast on this superhighway. And then we'll bring it full circle, so hang tight. In the late 80s, Larry and Bob Miner secured a majority stake of the company N-Cube, which aimed to solve problems by addressing them with thousands of processors all at once. In theory, nothing could tackle an issue with more force, more speed, and at a lower cost. The young company had huge promise. However, problems would soon surface in the nature of Larry and Bob's agreement with the top brass at N-Cube on two fronts. Eventually, Larry and Bob would realize that the thousands of processors core to N-Cube's brand were really hard to get working on one singular problem, though they would reach this conclusion long after taking ownership of the company. Before that epiphany, though, the folks at N-Cube aired a pretty interesting grievance. Hey, Bob Miner is taking 33% of the company and has paid the amount due for that entire share. Why the hell has Larry, who now owns 66%, not paid a dime? It wasn't a lack of funds on Larry's part, that's for sure. And when Larry was asked why he hadn't paid them, not even he could give a good answer. They arranged a monthly payment plan to help him get through it. And Bob, alongside him, paid his full obligation. That's Bob's obligation. And then Larry still didn't pay a thing. Eventually, he was taken to court and was asked if he understood he owed money plus interest now. And he was like, yeah. And they were like, you're going to pay that amount, right? And he was like, yeah. And they were like, okay, when? And to that, Larry said, I don't know. What did it take to get Larry to budge on this? After Larry refused a court order to pay, a judge ordered his house and his collection of Japanese art to be sold to pay the debts. And then Larry caved. May of 1993, he sold shares to pay the $8 million balance, leaving him a paltry $1.25 billion in remaining Oracle shares. Now, did Larry ever make anything of N-Cube? No. Though not for a lack of trying. In the long run, N-Cube would be Larry's distraction factory. And once the information highway gave way to the information superhighway, Larry suddenly knew exactly what to do with the bones of N-Cube. All those thousands of processors would probably do a great job of bringing video on demand to consumers. These efforts represented a return to form for Larry Ellison.
Yeah, he is like, hey, dev team, invent this thing.
Yeah, and that's it, right? This time the vision is this. Hey, look, it's a PC type thing you put on top of your TV, and then you hook it up to the TV, and bing, bang, boom, you've got yourself a thing that gives you shit you want to watch whenever you want to watch it. Put simply, it's on demand from the early 2000s. The dev team was like, okay, yeah, Larry, you're a genius. All right. And then they got to work wasting away in the lab to invent the thing. Stunningly, they managed to get data from movies and music videos into the server, though they weren't able to get anything to show on the TV. So next, Larry was like, hey, in 2 weeks, I want to present this software to a bunch of users in Orlando. In 2 weeks. So you've got 2 weeks, okay? So back to wasting away, the devs went. Miraculously, the devs were able to pull this off, which is an incredible feat. And though they made all of this, they pulled all of this off before the trade show in Orlando, where Larry Ellison was able to demonstrate this software, playing music videos and movies for a wide audience. The audience didn't necessarily understand exactly what was happening. Maybe that was due to Larry's presentation. Maybe the technology was a lot to digest. B, the success of this as an industry, video on demand, was not entirely up to Larry. Larry had a very, very potentially lucrative solution on his hands, assuming the phone companies got on board with building out this infrastructure. And they just wouldn't. And without their buy-in, none of this would ever come to fruition. So the information superhighway went up in a puff of smoke. Now, we've covered this inclination of authors for biographies and whatever else. This book, The Difference Between God and Larry Ellison, as they all do, looks to exonerate Larry by making up victories for his failed venture and giving stupid intangible achievement awards to him, saying like, oh, in 1992, only 2% of US citizens knew of Oracle's existence, and by the middle of the decade, that number was 40%. Now, is this good even? It should be clear at this point that awareness of Oracle's existence among US consumers, it's not going to move the revenue needle that much. All of Oracle's customers are corporate at this moment, and Oracle, like AWS, is happiest while being viewed like some sort of medium for commerce rather than an agent of commerce.
Yeah, people knowing who they are does not matter to them.
In fact, it might hurt them.
Yeah, yeah, you know what? That's a good point. I feel like the less like consumers know about an infrastructure-based product, the better it is being, the better of a job it is doing it being an infrastructure-based product and an end product. But think about AWS, for example. People outside of like the world of finance don't really, they learned what AWS was when it went down a couple weeks ago and their computer stopped working.
Yeah, everything turned off.
Exactly. Like they AWS doesn't want consumers to know that AWS exists because it's supposed to just be working all the time.
Yeah, that's it. And when it does fail, what the perfect scenario for AWS is when it fails, what happened a few weeks ago happens. And its user base treats its existence or problems with its existence like they treat the weather outside. You can't stop the rain, so put on a raincoat and brave it.
Yeah, well said.
There's another angle the book could have come at this thing from, and that's this. Did Oracle care about the failure of their VOD program? Because they didn't. Like, this was an unnecessary point for them to make. Larry was busy, and corporate was fine focusing on the company's main mission. Did the failure of VOD bother Larry? No. Larry was already on to the next thing, and this is what mattered to corporate. They focus on their core mission, and whatever the fuck Larry is up to next can be looked at as the company expanding into new business lines. Company makes financials look good. Larry the hype beast stays out of the way and makes the line go up. Birthed in 1993, the web browser Mosaic was on its way to changing shit and becoming another car for Larry to chase. His big idea was this. Hey, non-academics are actually going to start using their computers to look at porn and stuff. And maybe we don't need home computers to be all that powerful. Maybe what we need is a centralized bank of servers where all the porn can live that is really powerful. And then that can support what people do on the web. And then we can do the unthinkable. We can do away with all that heavy and expensive infrastructure inside of the home computer. and sell personal computers that are just really good at connecting to that central server, and we can price those at like $500.
Hmm.
Now, this did three things for Larry's sake and for the benefit of the staff at Oracle. It kept Larry out of the way of the part of his organization that was already cash flowing. It also painted a picture of rabid expansion ambitions. Again, line go up. And it did this while keeping Larry away from acquisitions. And this is crucial. Earlier in the decade, Larry was thinking real hard about facilitating and participating in a multi-billion-dollar acquisition of Apple. In hindsight, this was an excellent idea, but in the present moment, it posed a massive, massive risk. The people at Oracle knew that Larry was going to find his way into the business of hardware eventually. They couldn't do much to stop the man, and him doing so without going out and buying a hardware company was nothing but good. For Larry personally, this venture into hardware fulfilled his urge to take jabs at Microsoft, though Microsoft was a common one. I think a big thing here is that Larry needs someone to bully. Sometimes he's the bigger boy on the playground, like with the shareholders of NQ, but sometimes Larry is the shorter, weaker, and dumber kid. Nonetheless, the urge remains, and in Larry's mind, the network computer was the perfect gut punch. The network computer, by the way, was the name of Larry's next big thing, and though it gave him the opportunity to ruffle feathers, most in Silicon Valley knew that this was an idea destined to die in the idea stage. Mark Andreessen, who we will cover at some point of Netscape fame, did a pretty good job driving the problem home, basically saying, hey, PCs are $2,000 or $3,000. The first $1,000 won't even get you the stuff you need for the thing to turn on. What exactly is Ellison planning to strip out to reach a price point of $500? The book quotes Andreessen directly on this. PCs are it for the next 5 years. Ellison's network computer is nonsense. The book, again, hands a fake achievement award to Larry for this one. These books do this shit so much. For planting the seeds for future ideas. You remember how much of this shit happened with Soros? However, this book was not written late enough to catch the ultimate failure of the network computer. When the book was written, Larry's network computer was doing the things that Larry loved more than anything else. It was getting him attention, and a shitload of it. In fact, the first time he mentioned the idea, you ready for this, Money Mike? For a network computer, it was at a party held by William Jefferson Clinton in 1996. He put the bug in the president's ear that the U.S. could put a network computer in front of every student in every school in America for a reasonable price. And the idea was so captivating that Bill Clinton asked Larry Ellison to take a ride in the presidential limo to discuss the idea further.
Oh my.
Isn't that impressive?
Yeah.
And this story was told by Larry Ellison, which means it's a lie. However, the concept did get him on the Charlie Rose show and in magazines and in newspapers all over the place. The prospect of taking on Bill Gates got naysayers like the previously mentioned Mark Andreessen on board, after Andreessen again publicly said that he thought the idea was a con and that he couldn't believe people still listened to Larry Ellison. He apparently decided to change his tune. In May of 1996, a few months after that quote was published, in fact, he joined Larry Ellison for a press conference on the network computer where he proudly committed Netscape to helping to create the standards for Larry's device in concert with Apple and Sun Microsystems and IBM. The author of The Difference Between God and Larry managed to corner Mark as he was leaving that press conference, and when pressed on whether or not he bought into Larry Ellison's mumbo-jumbo, Mark just refused to answer the question and slinked into his car. Now, the charitable element of Larry's marketing got Larry the highest profile presser of all, a seat on Oprah Winfrey's show. As part of the marketing blitz, and perhaps in an effort to give back, Larry Ellison agreed to donate 300 network computers to James Flood Magnet School, which was the poorest school in the Bay Area, and this was the focus of the Oprah interview. When he joined Oprah on stage, her show played a clip summarizing Larry's extravagant life, and then Oprah began congratulating him on the donation. Had the computers actually been donated yet? No. In theory, they would be donated the following spring after the required infrastructure was built into the otherwise poorly funded school, but the point remained. Larry was nice guy billionaire who was doing nice guy charity. Now, the entirety of Larry's segment on Oprah's show was Oprah swooning over Larry's wealth and Larry's generosity. Like, wow, how does it feel to have a plane? Wow, that boat is incredible, all that stuff.
like Oprah didn't know.
It's Oprah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
how much was Oprah worth back then?
She was on the fast track to being a billionaire. I don't think she was a billionaire yet, but I think she was on the Forbes list at this point.
That makes sense, because like you were saying that, and I was forgetting the fact that like Oprah used to have this incredibly established media presence. Like you said it, getting on Oprah Winfrey's show was like the biggest thing that you could do.
Oh, if you were an author and you got on Oprah's show, you were on the New York Times bestsellers list immediately.
Yeah.
She was a king and queen maker.
Absolutely. Some of the kings that she made kind of sucked, but well, that's a different episode.
A lot of them. Yeah, she had a lot of Klansmen on that. And let's not mince words here. Was this a marketing effort on Larry's part? Yeah, Oprah knew that. And the principal of James Flood Magnet School knew it, and Larry damn sure knew it. But what Ellen Spencer, the principal of James Flood, also knew was that 300 free computers certainly wouldn't leave her students worse off. Assuming the donation was ultimately honored, and we can't find any information to the contrary, this was a nice gift. It's a whole bunch of people making the best out of a billionaire being in the Bay Area. It probably costed Oracle somewhere around $200,000, meaning it was an excellent choice for marketing dollars. But here's the thing. This softball bullshit is just about all Larry did in interviews. This is kind of how billionaire interviews work. People become billionaires, and then all of American media is like, hey, who is that guy who's got all that money and all that cool stuff? What most of the world was now interested in was Larry's hobbies. As such, Larry became more interested in Larry's hobbies. He was still very enthusiastic about the network computer thing, but when he talked about himself around this time, the topic might migrate from the network computer to how much time he spends playing tennis on company time or sailing, which we don't plan on covering at all necessarily. Again, this was a net positive for the company and crucially nothing new. Some executives describe a 2-year cycle where Larry slowly disengages and then feverishly rushes back in to save the day. And in late 1999, it appeared this process was looping around to hyper-engaged Larry. Around this time, PC manufacturers began focusing on making PCs cheaper. It was becoming obvious that the network computer was doomed to fail.
Which meant that Larry now had nothing to do, which is a one ingredient recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it's pretty much like fire as an ingredient. Take a well-appointed living room, curtains, fine fabrics, nice upholstery, and then introduce your one ingredient, fire.
Napalm.
Further, as we all joined hands and rolled into the new millennium, Microsoft began choking on antitrust suits. Its stock price was falling, so Larry decided it was time to take a position as Oracle's CEO and kick things into 12th gear to really stick it to his longtime foe, Bill Gates.
Yeah, we didn't mention Larry's departure from this role because Larry didn't depart from this role. He had to be reminded of this by Ray Lane when he mentioned putting out a presser about the whole development of him returning as CEO. And Ray was like, Larry, you've been CEO this whole time.
Claire,
like, what are you talking about, man? Are you having a stroke?
What Ray knew in this moment was that this spelled trouble. Larry, as it turns out, is the biggest roosting chicken of all, and as he wrapped his feathers around the reins once again, his old ways began to take hold. On April 28th, Larry was, for a brief moment, if you didn't count a $10 billion chunk of Gates's fortune that was tied up in something other than his stock, the richest man in the world. Exactly 2 months later, a scandal broke out. While Microsoft was weathering antitrust suits, they were unsurprisingly seeking the assistance of PR firms. to help, get people more enthusiastic about Microsoft and make people like Microsoft. Isn't Microsoft and its quote unquote monopoly so great? Now, Oracle got word of this and shared the news with everyone. And on June 28th, 2000, it was revealed that Oracle got word of this by paying private investigators to dig through Microsoft's trash.
That's Larry.
That's Larry. And when confronted by it, Larry was like, well, it's not illegal. It's obviously unsavory. We're literally digging through their trash, but not illegal. 2 weeks later, Ray Lane, one of Larry's handlers, announced his departure from the company. And almost exactly 2 years from that point, thanks in part, mind you, to the dot-com bubble, the company's stock price dove from a high of around $42 to about $8. And that was July of 2002. We don't have time to keep writing on this. We want to. There's a whole lot that goes into this part, but this is where we're going to pick up for our final episode on Mr. Larry Ellison. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We don't know what your subscribing does for our exposure, but it apparently does a lot. Also, as a heads up, the next episode might be a side episode. We'll keep you posted on that front. But yeah, please subscribe. It apparently does a lot. Do you have comments? Dude, let us know. If you have suggestions or want to chat, shoot us an email or check out our subreddit. The links are in the episode description. We love you all. And goodbye.